Is America at war? I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. What is the line that would officially denote that the U.S. is at war with Russia? Consider that this week, the New York Times reported the U.S. provided intelligence about Russian units that allowed Ukrainians to target and kill many of the approximately 12 Russian generals Ukraine says have died in action. Intel was also provided that helped Kyiv attack and sink the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva. While it's unclear how many Russian sailors died in the attack, the U.S. believes that there were significant casualties. At the onset of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine more than 2 months ago, President Biden was insistent that he didn't want to make this a contest between the U.S. and Russia.
Direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III, something we must strive to prevent.
Fearing a potential nuclear conflict, his goal, it seemed, was to stand behind the Ukrainian people without military intervention and put pressure on Putin with sanctions, hoping that he would back off. When Ukraine begged for more military support, the U.S. at first appeared willing to support a transfer of MiG fighter jets from Poland. That deal was rejected by the Pentagon over fears that it could lead to open conflict between NATO and Russia. But the discretion exercised in that decision has evolved into what increasingly looks like a proxy battle. Consider this. The Biden administration has poured billions of dollars in missiles, anti-tank weapons, and ammunition into Ukraine. That's in addition to the valuable intelligence U.S. officials have given Ukraine and a $33 billion aid package the president wants Congress to take up. Administration officials are adamant there are clear limits on the intelligence the U.S. shares with Ukraine. That includes a ban on sharing intel that pinpoints senior Russian leaders by name to avoid crossing a line with Moscow. When asked by CNN's Brianna Keilar on Friday where that line is, this is what Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby had to say.
Well, I wouldn't describe any line as thin or imaginary, Brown. I would actually disagree with you on that. I'll tell you this. The intelligence that we provide to Ukraine is legal, it's lawful, it's legitimate, and it's limited. And we're very careful about what we share and when we share it.
Yet some current and former officials suggest that any limits the Biden administration has drawn for itself are arbitrary. No matter what the United States assesses might provoke Russia, that depends on the thinking of just one man, Vladimir Putin. To be clear, the aid the U.S. has provided has helped bolster Ukrainians to fight off the Russians. But as the Biden administration increases the amount and lethality of that support, will that not lead to real war with Russia? I want to know what you think. Go to my website at smerconish.com. Answer this week's survey question. Is the U.S. sharing of military intelligence with Ukraine worth the risk of further inflaming Putin? Here with me to discuss is the former U.S. ambassador to NATO and former U.S. special representative for Ukraine, Kurt Volker. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being here. So facilitating MiG fighters to Ukraine, that was thought to be too provocative, but battlefield intelligence that kills generals or sinks a ship, that's okay. Help me understand the parameters of our involvement.
Right. Well, thank you for having me. And to start off on that, I would have thought we should have facilitated the Poles providing the MiG-29 aircraft because the Ukrainians are in a war of self-defense. Russia has attacked them. They have killed thousands of people. They've killed civilians. They've committed war crimes. And Ukraine has a right to self-defense under the UN Charter, Article 51. They have a right to defend themselves. With that, why wouldn't a country like Poland say if the Ukrainians need MiG-29s, we'll provide them? And why wouldn't the U.S. say, Poland, we got your back, you're a NATO ally, we'll be there for you? And similarly, information about where the Russians are when they're attacking the Ukrainians, I don't find that to be controversial in sharing that with the Ukrainians at all. What the Ukrainians do with it, that's up to them. They're the ones defending themselves. We're not fighting the Russians. But sharing information or providing the weaponry, I think, is perfectly fine.
Okay, but at a certain point, then we do draw a line. I'm going to put on the screen and I'll read aloud for you. This is also from the New York Times reporting, and it says the following. Not all the strikes have been carried out with American intelligence. A strike over the weekend at the location in eastern Ukraine where General Valery Gerasimov Russia's highest-ranking uniformed officer had visited was not aided by American intel. And then the key line, the United States prohibits itself from providing intelligence about the most senior Russian leaders. How come? Why is that off limits?
Well, I suppose that this is a self-imposed restriction. There's no legal basis for it, but I think it's because if we thought of ourselves as directly helping the Ukrainians target Russian generals, then the Russians might find it fair game to target American generals in Syria or in Libya or wherever. So we're probably self-limiting on that. But I want to stress a different point here, which is the Ukrainians have excellent intelligence of their own, which is probably how they did this. The Russians have had problems with command and control. Their secure communications have not always worked, and they've been using the Ukrainian cell phone network occasionally. And this has helped the Ukrainians actually listen in and find out what's going on and find out where those people are. And if you're the Ukrainians defending yourselves, then why wouldn't you be targeting the command and control leadership?
Are you surprised that Putin has thus far exercised seemingly restraint? For example, it doesn't appear, unless I'm just not aware and the public is not aware, cyber attacks that many had anticipated would have been launched against the United States.
Right. So first off, it's hard to describe anything Putin has done as restraint. They have launched a major invasion of Ukraine. They tried to take the capital. They've lobbed rockets at cities, Lviv, Kyiv, Odessa, and so forth. They've killed civilians. They've bombed schools. They've bombed hospitals. There is no restraint here. Now, what you are seeing is some effective deterrence. The Ukrainians have very good cyber capabilities as well. They've had their own cyber attacks against Russia. And the Russians know that we have very strong cyber capabilities. And so if they were to use cyber attacks against the United States, I think they actually might fear that we would be using cyber offense against them to hit back. That's not troops on the ground. There's no body bags out of that. But I think they would be concerned about that. So when you look at the things that Russia has not done, they haven't done the big cyber attacks, probably because they're deterred. They haven't done nuclear weapons, and let's pray that they never do. But I think they may be deterred from that at a strategic level. And what we worry about is the tactical level. And even there, I think they have to be concerned that if they used an actual nuclear weapon, that would draw the U.S. or others to direct strikes against them in some way. And they have to be worried about that.
Quick final question. Are we in a proxy war with Russia?
We are not, no. We are in a position of helping Ukraine defend itself against a direct Russian attack on Ukraine. So this is not about two superpowers sitting off somewhere and having their minions go fight a war against each other. This is Russia directly involved in trying to exterminate Ukraine, calling them Nazis, and the Ukrainians defending themselves and getting a lot of support from the rest of the world as they do so.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michael.